Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, presentation from the American Business Immigration Coalition and Greenberg Traurig Law Firm. We're going to give folks a few minutes to join the webinar, so if you could please hold on, we'll get started shortly. Hi, everyone that's joining us. Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to take a few minutes to give folks a chance to join the webinar. If you could just sit back, and we'll get started shortly. Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us today. So today's webinar, we're going to get started in a few moments. We're just giving folks a few minutes to join. So please sit back, and we'll get started shortly. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Irakere Picón. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to give folks a few minutes to join the webinar. Just a reminder that throughout the webinar presentation, if you have any questions that come up, feel free to type them in the chat box, and then we'll have a portion during the presentation where we can answer those questions from folks on our expert panel. So we're going to give it a few more minutes for people to join, let people get settled in, and we'll start shortly. Hi, everyone. This is Irakere Picón. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to give folks a couple minutes to join. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a function on the webinar interface where you can type in your questions, and we will make sure to answer them during the Q&A section towards the end of the presentation. Hi, everyone. We're seeing a good number of folks joining, close to 100, and that actually is growing as I see the number jump. Just before we get started, I want to remind everyone on the call and on the presentation that we have a chat function in the webinar interface where you can type in your question, and we will make sure to answer it during the Q&A section. We'll give it one more minute, and then we'll start. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Irakere Picón. I'm the Director of Legal Services at the American Business Immigration Coalition. Welcome to today's webinar, which is presented by the American Business Immigration Coalition and in partnership with the Greenberg Traurig Law Firm. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. As I mentioned, I'm the Director of Legal Services at ABIC. I'm also an immigration attorney and one of the first licensed attorneys in DACA, with DACA in Illinois. I actually was undocumented for about 28 years, including 6 years with DACA, and luckily permanent resident. But I know a lot of friends and family, and obviously my clients who still depend on DACA, and we're anxiously waiting for a decision on the Supreme Court. And luckily we have something to celebrate. We're really excited about that decision. But we have more work to do. In today's presentation, we're going to focus on a few of the topics, and we're going to discuss basically the results of that decision. We're going to get some federal immigration updates. We're going to get some special remarks and a testimony from Niño Flores, who is an engineer and DACA recipient. We're also going to give sort of a recommendation for DACA recipients for individuals who are undocumented but never applied for DACA, and as well as employers. Towards the end, we're going to have a Q&A section, and we're going to have a few slides on next steps. At this moment, I'd like to invite Carol Segal, who is the co-founder of Crate and Barrel and a co-chair of the American Business Immigration Coalition, to share her thoughts and remarks on last week's victory and what it means moving forward. Carol?
Thank you, Irakere. Good afternoon. My name is Carol Segal, and I thank you all for joining us today. I am co-founder of Crate and Barrel and also a co-chair of the American Business Immigration Coalition. I became involved with immigration reform because of the DACA children, and I know and their families. These individuals want to be part of this country, and I believe that we need to give them an opportunity to fully participate and become part of our communities and economy. I was very happy to hear that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration had incorrectly terminated the DACA program and that their initial rescission order was no longer valid. This means that people can continue to renew their DACA, and we hope that new applicants can also have the opportunity to be granted DACA. I also want to say that DACA isn't enough. It is so important for us to fight for a full DREAM Act and a pathway to citizenship for the undocumented youth and their parents. We cannot stand to lose our friends, teachers, students, colleagues, and neighbors. If we fail to act to find a permanent solution, not only will it rip apart families and our communities, it will have a grave effect on our schools, business, and economy. From the words of the United States Chamber of Commerce, I quote, "Ending DACA would be a nightmare for dreamers, a nightmare for business, and a nightmare for America's economy." A report from the Cato Institute last year found that the U.S. Treasury will take in $92 billion in the next 10 years if dreamers are permitted to stay here, work, and pay taxes. Our economy depends on the DACA workforce. Apple depends on over 250 DACA computer programmers, and our member Molex depends on over 50 DACA engineers in Illinois alone and over 200 across the country. I strongly believe we should allow dreamers and their parents to apply for citizenship. It is a good, moral, and economic investment for our country, and I really believe that the time is now.
Thank you, Carol, for your remarks, and we are truly grateful for your support and to have you as our ally. I'd like to now invite Niño Flores, who I've had the opportunity to get to know over the last couple of years as a very talented engineer and fierce advocate for other DACA recipients and for folks like her parents. Ana?
Hi, Irakere. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Niño Flores. I am a civil engineer at Clark Beach. I have DACA. I wish to thank Ms. Carol Segal, ABIC co-chair, for supporting not only me but my parents. And I want to thank Mr. John Browe, who provided my scholarship at the Illinois Institute of Technology to enable me to graduate from IIT with an engineering degree. I am 26 years old. I was 19 years old when I got my DACA, and I arrived to the United States when I was 5. Pre-DACA is governed by insecurity for a normal future, fear of driving a car and being deported, and inability to travel far from Illinois. Post-DACA has been an era of hope and light. I have been able to pursue my career as civil engineer, working on impactful infrastructure projects. I can drive my dad to his landscaping jobs on the weekend without worry, and I've been able to travel as far as Hawaii. But growing up as an undocumented immigrant in this country came with endless challenges, such as not knowing English, learning it yourself, becoming your family's translator at age 7, and seeing your family's financial struggle. The idea and the fear that while your dad is out buying milk and cereal could lead to his deportation, that leaves a certain trauma within you. Undocumented youth grow up with the feeling of hopelessness and fear. During my sophomore year in college, DACA was announced. DACA was a victory won, and it was obtained as a result of the organized undocumented youth. Young women and men alike continuously share their stories while going to school, while working, while exposing themselves and their families for a shot at an opportunity. DACA granted a valid driver's license and work authorization to its recipients. Something so simple, but to those desperate, it was just everything. DACA has had an emotional, psychological, and economical impact on all its recipients by, providing a beautiful thing called dignity in the forms of work opportunities, the ability to pursue your career, travel, provide a feeling of safety, financial stability, and most importantly, belonging. Last Thursday, hearing the Supreme Court's decision was powerful and an emotional day. It was an emotional day because I was literally crying of happiness for those who are hungry for an opportunity. They will be now able to apply and benefit from such an amazing program. Being in the shadows and being eager for the light myself, I could not be more joyous for these folks. It was a powerful day as well because I realized I want to become a U.S. citizen. And I've never admitted that. I've never said that before. I've been proudly standing on my feet with my hand over my heart for the Pledge of Allegiance since I was 5 years old. I've always looked forward to the magic of every 4th of July. I contribute to my community, my church, and the government. I am exhausted from vowing and begging for a chance. We deserve more. To all the potential and current DACA recipients on this call, remember, opportunities rarely present themselves twice. Apply, continue to renew, do the steps needed in your case to benefit from DACA. A keen and kind woman told me once, if you're not willing to speak up for yourself, how do you expect others to fight for you? There's power in your story, embrace it. And to all the allies on this call, this movement is not only about DACA. The whole immigration system must change. DACA marks the first step. The original dreamers, our parents, our grandparents, they deserve dignity and a path to citizenship. We belong here. We contribute. We pay taxes. We must continue speaking up for ourselves. That's how DACA was obtained in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for your strong and encouraging words. And you are right that we have much more work to do to protect our family, our friends, and coworkers. Before we get moving to the review of the Flores decision, I wanted to invite Rebecca Shee, our fearless leader and executive director of the American Business Immigration Coalition, to share some federal immigration updates with us. Becca?
Great. Thank you so much, Irakere. Thank you, Carol and Anna. So in case there was any doubt that the Trump administration will try again to terminate DACA, the president yesterday confirmed that he will resubmit paperwork to end the program. And he told the Dreamers to, quote, chin up, good things are going to happen. So to echo our co-chair, Carol Segal, and our DACA engineer, Ana Flores, we need to give permanent protection to Dreamers, to their parents, to guarantee their ability to live, to work, and to breathe without fear. We are encouraged by a nearly united Democrat response for a DREAM Act. We're encouraged by a broad range of Republican senators for a DREAM Act. If you add it all up, we are well over the 60 votes needed to pass a bill in the Senate. The House already passed the DREAM and Promise Act, and recent polling showed that DACA has the support of over 80% of American voters, 72% of swing voters, and even 67% of Trump voters. Time is now. We urge Senate Leader McConnell to support H.R. 6, the DREAM and Promise Act, or the Graham and Durbin DREAM Act. Also, yesterday during a visit to the Arizona border, President Trump boasted about the progress of his big and beautiful wall, as he said. He further doubled down on campaign promises to continue his immigration crackdown. His new immigration bans this week will have negative impacts on the economy. A new proclamation took effect immediately on Monday, denies entry to the U.S. to high-skilled workers and some agricultural workers. They exist in 4 major visa categories: H-1B, L, J, and H-2B, with the exception of workers in the food supply chain. In total, the administration's new policy will block about 167,000 visa holders and their family members, in addition to another 158,000 people who get green cards but are blocked from coming until the restrictions are lifted. We are concerned that these bans will hurt American jobs and our nation's economic competitiveness. Everybody that's in America who has these diverse skills already has those jobs. The problem is that there's just a gap between the demand and the number of folks who can meet it. In fact, each H-1 worker creates jobs for 2 American workers, and each H-4 worker creates 4 American jobs. These are the exact diverse skill sets that we need to recover and rebuild from COVID. At ABIC, we will work with our members and partners for a DREAM Act. We will work for sensible immigration reform to create jobs, grow the economy, and keep families together.
Thank you, Rebecca, for those updates. Next, I'd like to invite Anna Morzy, who has nearly 20 years of experience as an immigration law attorney and who has a comprehensive background in providing legal and policy guidance in fast-evolving immigration laws, to give us a review of the Supreme Court's decision on last week's DACA case. She's also a shareholder at Greenberg Traurig LLP and is a steering committee member at the Illinois Business Immigration Coalition. Anna?
Thank you, Irakere. So hi, everyone out there. Let's take a quick review of the Supreme Court's decision regarding DACA and what are the real effects and what are we going to do next. So first of all, this was a 5-4 decision. A majority decision was written by Chief Justice John Roberts. Specifically, the decision found that the Trump administration's termination of DACA was 1, judicially reviewable, which is great because ultimately the Trump administration was saying that the Supreme Court shouldn't have any say as to what the Trump administration wants to do with DACA, and 2, that the rescission of DACA was done in an arbitrary and capricious way that violated federal law. So when you take a look at that language, this is really a good thing for individuals who are pro-DACA. However, and there's a big but and a however here, the Supreme Court did say that the administration still has a right to terminate DACA if they follow the proper procedure, which is basically the rules in the Administrative Procedures Act. So knowing this, what are the effects of vacating the 2017 rescission of DACA? So first of all, it does legally return DACA to what it was before the Trump administration moved to terminate the program. But, another but and a however, it is unclear how the U.S. Immigration Service will interpret the Supreme Court's decision for new DACA applicants and whether they will really begin processing initial applications. So, there's a lot of concern about new applicants and basically what they should do. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this. What does this really mean for undocumented youth as well as employers? So first of all, in terms of existing DACA applicants or recipients, so existing DACA recipients, you can continue to file your renewal applications. In fact, we all encourage you to do that. Obviously, you're going to hear a lot from us, especially from me, and, obviously from the organization. Please make sure to speak to an immigration attorney or an accredited Department of Justice representative to review your eligibility once again and to screen for any other forms of relief. This whole thing has been going on since 2017 for almost 3 years. So ultimately, there might have been other changes in your personal circumstances or ultimately within some of the laws. Also, we really encourage you to renew and file those applications for renewal as soon as possible. Definitely 3 to 6 months before your current DACA expires. I generally say, try to ensure that your renewal application is filed with the Immigration Service about 120 to 150 days before your current expiration date, just so that you don't have any sort of gap in work authorization pursuant to DACA. Now, for existing applicants, what are you required to do? So the renewal fee continues to be $495 like it was before. The caveat here that I will say, that's what it is today. One of the things that we are waiting for the Trump administration to do is basically to increase filing fees, whether it's DACA or any other immigration benefits. So, again, if you're eligible to file now, so that hopefully you can take advantage of the lower filing fee. The same forms still need to be completed. I won't read them off to you. Now, the good news is that generally when you file for an extension of DACA, you don't have to resubmit all of that eligibility requirement, all of those eligibility requirements that you did submit when you initially filed for the benefit. However, the caveat here is that if your current DACA has already been expired for a while, you may be required to do so. So, take a really close look at the instructions for the forms that are mentioned in the requirements section on this slide. And also, obviously, you can go to uscis.gov or contact a trusted individual or an attorney who will be able to help you. Now, moving on, to new DACA applicants, and this is really the trickiest part of all because we are really unclear, as I said before, what the U.S. Immigration Service will do with new DACA applicants. Will they process these applications? Are they going to sit on them? Right after the SCOTUS decision last week, basically the Immigration Service came up with a statement that was kind of, for lack of a better term, wishy-washy, meaning, they respect the SCOTUS decision, but they're not sure. So it's difficult to provide clear guidance on this point. Some organizations, as well as attorneys and practitioners, advisors out there are basically saying, move forward and submit new applications. I think there's definitely pros and cons to this. So this is, again, one of those situations where you really want to speak to a trusted immigration attorney or other representative or advisors. Now, in terms of new DACA applicants, what are the pros for applying for those for that benefit of that new DACA authorization? Well, obviously, if the Immigration Service does process these petitions, terrific. You're going to get a DACA approval, including work authorization, which we would be very excited for anyone out there to have that benefit. However, the unknowns or the risks here is that we are waiting for the U.S. Immigration Service to provide additional guidance. We are also waiting for the Trump administration to take next steps. As we just heard Rebecca mention, the Trump administration seems to be, looking and already proactively drafting steps to ensure that, DACA is rescinded and hopefully Dreamers will have other benefits that will be similar to DACA. What all of that means is very hard to tell right now without having been provided very specific government instructions. So if you are a new DACA applicant and you do apply, the risk here is that the Immigration Service may very well reject your DACA application. You could also lose that filing fee. And, you're obviously providing your information to the U.S. government. It's difficult to tell how and if the U.S. government or the Immigration Service would use that against a new DACA applicant. But again, you're providing information, so there's always some risk. Going on to sort of the next slide, and I guess it's a bit more of the same here. Really carefully evaluate the pros and cons for yourself. Speak to a trusted individual. However, the one thing that I will say is don't, I think the recommendation from all of us is don't necessarily run out tomorrow and file the DACA application unless, of course, we hear really terrific proactive news, and we will share that with all of you. However, do take the time to gather the documentation for a DACA application. Use this time to basically, put together the information that if we go over to the next slide in terms of DACA eligibility. So, if and when we do get the total green light to move forward with new DACA applicants, to be able to apply, you're ready to go and instead of sort of taking more time to gather the information. I won't spend a lot of time in terms of the documentation for eligibility. Again, I encourage you to contact an organization like ABIC, to contact an attorney that you trust or someone that you have worked with. But ultimately, the one thing that I really stress here is, a lot of people, in terms of DACA eligibility, they can file on their own. They obviously have friends who sometimes help them. And a lot of the information, I think, is pretty common sense in terms of the types of documents that you need to gather for the DACA filing. However, if anyone out there is thinking of filing for DACA and you do have any sort of criminal history, if you have any felony offenses, if you have multiple misdemeanor offenses, I really we all highly encourage you to contact an immigration attorney and go over what exactly may be the effect if you apply having that criminal history. Now, the one thing I do as I say this, I don't want to discourage anyone with any sort of criminal infractions from applying for DACA, but at the same time, do a deep dive evaluation and make sure that applying for DACA, frankly, won't get you into a risky legal situation. So in terms of how many individuals could be impacted when they do file for DACA, and we're talking about new DACA applicants here. So according to various studies, we're talking about an additional 130,000 individuals who will hopefully be able to file new DACA applications. That is tremendous. And in terms of filing fees, we're talking about generating over $64 million for the U.S. government. So the numbers, the impact is tremendous here. And we really, again, encourage you, if you need help or if you need a connection with, whether it's an attorney or even legal nonprofit services, contact us at the email on this particular slide. We're here. We're obviously willing to help you in any way to make life easier. I also wanted to just very quickly talk about this from an employer perspective. So first of all, this is terrific for employers because, as we heard a little bit at the beginning of this presentation, so many of ABIC's member employers have DACA recipients who are employed by them. There are so many individuals out there working in the healthcare field and in the food industry field that otherwise wouldn't have any work authorization if we didn't have the SCOTUS decision that we have in front of us. So bottom line is, employers, you absolutely are eligible to continue to employ these DACA individuals. And also, just as a reminder, that employers are prohibited by law from discriminating against employing individuals who have DACA. So, if there's an employer out there who is basically seeing an applicant who does have DACA work authorization and thinking, oh, I don't want to employ this person because DACA is not around, that is not a basis for turning down such a applicant for employment. So at this point, I will turn it back to, I believe, Irakere.
Yes, thank you, Anna, for that presentation, for that information. And we will be keeping an eye out for any changes and any sort of guidance that we hear about in terms of USCIS processing new DACA applications, because we know, as we saw in that slide, there's a lot of individuals who would benefit from submitting an initial application. So before I invite Andrea to moderate the Q&A, I want to invite and remind the audience that if you have a question based on any of the slides or any of the previous information, please feel free to type it into the chat box, and we will make sure to answer it on the Q&A. So with that being said, I want to introduce my colleague, Andrea, who works in Texas and is the business manager in San Antonio and Austin. Andrea, excuse me.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So my name is Andrea Ramos Hernandez. I am a DACA recipient that lives in San Antonio, Texas, and I am the San Antonio and Austin Business Outreach Manager for the Texas Business Immigration Coalition, which is a part of the American Business Immigration Coalition. So I want to go ahead and thank everyone for being able to participate in this panel. And I'm going to go ahead and start with a question that we definitely have heard a lot in the last couple of days, which is going to be for Ms. Anna Morzy. Ms. Morzy, do you think you can tell us what the status of advanced parole is?
So right now, the Immigration Service, as far as we know, is not processing advanced paroles for DACA recipients. I have not seen any be processed at this point. And honestly, the other thing is, due to the whole COVID situation, my recommendation, and so COVID, all of these executive orders that do not involve DACA, frankly, with travel restrictions, my recommendation is for individuals not to travel outside of the United States if it's at all possible.
Thank you so much. This question is now for Irakere. Because people anticipate that the Trump administration will terminate DACA again, how can people be proactive and support Dreamers?
Thank you, Andrea. So in terms of allies and employers, I think it's crucial to continue supporting DACA recipients and potential DACA recipients by not only becoming a supporter of the DREAM Act and other similar legislation. We can be a vehicle for your voice to be shared. But I think there's also opportunities to directly impact Dreamers and other DACA recipients with direct financial assistance. As was mentioned earlier, the renewal fee is close to $500, and if a person hires a private attorney, it could be even more with those attorney's fees. And so, if you are aware of any DACA recipients or you're close with any DACA recipients, I would encourage you to reach out to them and ask if they need any support. I think following the legislation and becoming involved on the advocacy side can also be very important, especially if you are a business owner or an employer.
Thank you so much for answering that. Rebecca, is there any insight if and when the Trump administration will decide to terminate again or start the process?
Well, we saw yesterday the president did affirm that he will refile for the termination of DACA, and so we will pay attention to how that plays out. But in the meantime, the most robust and permanent protection for Dreamers and their parents is in law, is action by Congress. And so I would strongly recommend everyone on this call to call and tweet at your senators and ask them to either sponsor H.R. 6, the Dream and Promise Act, or the Graham and Durbin bill, and both of them are DREAM Acts. This is the best protection for our dreamers, and we encourage you to do that.
Thank you so much. And another question, how likely is it for the DREAM Act to pass in the Senate? Which senators can help pass the DREAM Act?
So I'll take a first step at the response. So we all know that our Congress works best under pressure, and the SCOTUS DACA decision, in a sense, released some of that pressure valve. And so until there is a real threat of something changing, it seems unlikely to me that anybody is going to do anything that's productive before the elections. Having said that, we do believe that, that if we continue to push, continue to make our voices heard, build a movement of business leaders like Carol Segal and our dreamers like Anna and all of you and their parents, we could turn this around. So again, call your senators and say that we need a solution now for our dreamers and their parents.
Thank you, Becca. And this is going to be a question to Ms. Ana Flores. This is a question that came in. I am a dreamer in high school. I do not have DACA. You talked about sharing your story. How did you get over that fear?
Yeah, hi Andrea. For me personally, getting over this fear happened.
Anna, could you fix your microphone? Sorry to interrupt you. It's a little hard to hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. Could you guys hear me better?
That's better.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So, in terms of realizing, how did I get over my fear? I realized that people will continue to take advantage of you and our immigrant community if you remain in fear and in silence. And I would see that constantly with my dad and his work. People would try to take advantage of his work and pay him less, and use the fact that he didn't speak English fluently to take advantage. And that kind of really makes your blood boil sometimes. Someone that you care about, and you realize you have to step up and you need to stop having that fear, and you have to not remain in silence. And you have to realize that it's okay to say no, and it's okay to say this is enough. And that's how I came to my realization.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Anna. I'm going to go ahead and continue with some of the questions. This is going to go for Ms. Morzy. Is there a risk of expedited removal if my students apply for DACA?
I mean, possibly. I think ultimately the good thing is that if you do apply for DACA and for some reason you find yourself in removal proceedings, I think there is a lot of support from the legal community, even from judges, to basically sort of defer final decisions, because basically, because a lot of these individuals, other than for this political wrangling, would most likely qualify for DACA. Where I would really be concerned about expedited removal, though, is, again, if someone does have criminal issues, that's where I think that risk for expedited removal becomes a lot higher.
Okay, thank you so much. And then these following two questions are more of questions regarding the qualifying for the DACA program. And it could be either to you, Irakere, or Anna. When will I have had to enter the USA to qualify for DACA? That's one. And then two, the age range was to qualify for DACA 15 to 31. Any idea what will happen to that age range for people who aged out into the program?
So I can answer both of those questions. In terms of the first question, individuals must have been present in the U.S. on June 15, 2007 to be eligible for DACA, and must have been physically present in the U.S. on June 15, 2012. You're not supposed to have any breaks in any physical presence in the U.S., but the first date to qualify is June 15 of 2007. The age range for DACA is you must have been at least 16 years old when you enter the U.S. To be able to apply for DACA, and you are not able to be eligible if you are over 30 when you apply for an initial DACA. And so the program itself hasn't changed. The parameters or the requirements haven't changed per se, because there's no new executive order establishing DACA. So the same rules that were put into place back in 2012 are the same that remain today. And so it's probably unlikely that age range is going to be expanded unless there's some form of legislation through the DREAM Act, or there's a new executive order addressing some of these issues within DACA. But obviously, with us being an election year, it's going to be very difficult, and obviously under this administration, not likely to have a new and better amended DACA.
Of course. Thank you so much, Irakere. And then another question. Could the Trump administration be sued for not accepting new applicants?
I'll take that one. So this is Anna. They can very well be sued, and I think a lot of this, why I think we're being a bit sort of conservative in terms of advising new DACA applicants, to sort of, wait a little while before applying for benefits, is that there is a lot of, we're talking about what the administration will do, but organizations such as ABIC and other organizations are also really taking this time to figure out and to strategize what happens if the U.S. Immigration Service comes out and says, well, we won't accept new DACA applicants. So it definitely is possible that we're going to see much more legal and court action around this DACA issue.
Thank you, Anna. And then a follow-up question on that. How likely is it that the administration will succeed in terminating the DACA program before the end of the current presidential term? Can it move that quickly?
So this is Anna again, and Irakere and Rebecca, I think you can chime in on this as well. I think the chances are probably very small that things can move that quickly. The Trump administration can definitely put together a more robust reasoning for eliminating or rescinding DACA. But the issue is that ultimately, if they do that, it will end up in litigation once again. And the chances that that litigation will be resolved by November, I think, are extremely small, because the window at this point, between now and the November election, it's just getting smaller and smaller.
Yeah, I agree with Anna, and I think that also speaks to why we've seen a really broad range of Republican senators, not just the usual suspects, but even some senior Republican senators from deep red states who are calling for a legislative solution to DACA. Right, that understanding this back and forth in the courts is not the way to go. either for the dreamers themselves, their family, or for our economy.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Becca. I just wanted to go back and clarify one of my answers about the age range for DACA recipients. So just to be clear, if you applied for DACA and you were between 29 and 30 years old and you were approved, you are not prohibited from renewing your DACA if you are now older than 30 years old. So that 30-year-old requirement is only for the initial application. It doesn't matter for renewal. So if you were 29 when you first applied for DACA, you are now 35. It doesn't matter. You can continue renewing your DACA work permit. So I just wanted to clarify that for the audience. And I believe we have a few more minutes for questions. Andrea, are there any more that we've received?
Yes, thank you so much for that clarification, Irakere. We do have one last question. So for Ms. Carol Segal, Ms. Segal, I am an employer. I would like to get more involved and help my immigrant employees. What do you suggest that I can do?
Well, I don't know what category you're in, but there are some funds. We did list a fund here where that's one of the biggest things is supporting them with some financial aid to renew the $475. That there is some help with that, and I don't know what your business can do if you can support that person, but I know there are some funds that are working for some of the college applicants, and so that's one of the best things to do in the field, because that gets them over that bridge. One of the things that we've often talked about too is that we've had the question that they have a brother or sister who is not a DACA recipient, and they're in high school, and what should they be doing? And what we suggest to them is work hard, get a career, and you will find a job. There's a lot of support for that we need them to continue their education, not to give up, and to continue with hope. But the financial needs are the ones that if you can meet that, to do that for your employees, or that would be wonderful.
Thank you so much, Ms. Segal. I want to go ahead and thank you and thank everyone that was able to answer the questions. Thank you for the panel for doing this. And I want to go ahead and move on to the next section. So, when we look at what some of the partners in some of this fight towards immigration equity, we have seen some statements being put out. The National Immigration Law Center, or the NILC, and the Coalition for Human Rights of Los Angeles, CHRLA, are recommending that you speak to an attorney or DOJ accredited rep to determine if you're eligible and discuss the risks before you apply. And they are also urging that if you do choose to proceed with a renewal or first-time application, that you are represented by an attorney or an accredited representative. United We Dream has a DACA renewal fund that is available. You will see on the screen the link is available right there. United We Dream has stated that they believe the Supreme Court decision states that the program should reset to its original mandate in 2012 and new applicants must be accepted, but they also understand that it is now up to the Trump administration to respond on how the program will proceed. Also, another thing that I will go ahead and please encourage people on is that if you are able to do so, our organization, the American Business Immigration Coalition, will help folks with DACA renewals. Our website is abic.us, so it's abic.us, and you can find more information there. Also, as a person that is undocumented, that grew up in Texas, that had DACA at a young age. I want to go ahead and encourage people to understand the risks that are out there, to understand that hopefully this will actually lead to more equity in the future. So I would carefully advise for people to be aware of potential risks as things are occurring quite rapidly in the next couple of weeks. And obviously, once again, if you have the means to do so, I am encouraging anyone to donate to either DACA renewal funds or to our organization, as we will be helping DACA recipients process their renewals. Now, I want to go ahead and introduce Juan Carlos Cerda on what are the next steps to the program.
Thank you, Andrea. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan Carlos Cerda, and I am the DSW Business Outreach Manager for the Texas Business Immigration Coalition. Like many of you, I am also a DACA recipient, born in San Luis Potosí, Mexico, and raised in Dallas, Texas. As next steps to the U.S. Supreme Court decision, if you're an ally or an employer, please consider supporting a DACA recipient with the renewal fee. Please also contact your senators to co-sponsor H.R. 6, the American Dream and Promise Act, or the Graham-Dermott Dream Act. We need at least 60 votes in the Senate to pass either bill. And please consider joining ABIC as an employer, and please consider going to vote and encouraging others to vote. Now, if you are undocumented, please speak to an attorney or a DOJ accredited representative to renew your eligibility for DACA and other immigration relief. And finally, please consider joining a local or national organization to learn how you can become involved in efforts to pass the DREAM Act and other legislation that protects all immigrants. Remember, DACA was obtained when Dreamers pressured elected officials to take action. If you have any questions about DACA, please contact us at info@americanbic.biz. You can see that on the PowerPoint. And with that, I'll turn it back to Irakere.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. I want to thank Carol Segal, Anna Morzy, Ana Niño Flores for sharing her testimony, as well as Andrea and Juan Carlos for helping us with the Q&A and the next steps. Just want to remind the audience that you can download this presentation using the Resources tab on the webinar interface, and we will publish the webinar once it's downloaded, and we'll send it out to everyone who registered on the webinar. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us at info@americanbic.biz. You can also find us on Facebook, and we hope that this has been informative to you all, and we hope that this energizes you to become more involved, and if you're an employer or an ally, to really lend a hand and support a DACA recipient, either at your place of work or at your church or community. It's really important to help folks and to make sure that they don't feel hopeless, because there are opportunities for making a change, and we just had a very important victory this past week, and we're working to get more victories for all the immigrants that need to be protected and supported, and also encouraged to be engaged on this issue. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Please reach out to us. Have a wonderful day. Hello?